Don Adriano Mancuso has survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 government investigations, and a decade of running the most dangerous criminal empire in the city of Castello. He has never in 25 years been surprised. Tonight, he opens the trunk of his most private vehicle, the untraceable car used only for extractions, disappearances, and emergencies, and finds a 6-year-old girl curled around a sleeping puppy, both of them breathing softly, completely at peace, as if they had simply chosen the safest place they could find. The girl opens one eye, looks up at the most feared man in Castello and says, "Your car smells like pine trees." "I like it." Don Adriano has no protocol for this. The night smelled like rain and burning rubber. Don Adriano Mancuso moved through the alley behind the Ferrara Street warehouse with the unhurried calm of a man who had done this exact thing many times before, because he had. 3 raids in 6 years. 2 of them worse than tonight. He had always made it to the car. The car had always been waiting. He had chosen this particular vehicle himself, 9 years ago, from a private dealer in Genoa. A nondescript black sedan, unremarkable in every visible way, with a reinforced chassis, run-flat tires, and a fuel tank large enough to reach the border without stopping. No one outside his innermost circle knew it existed. Its location rotated every 7 days. Its plates were changed on a schedule known only to him and his mechanic, old Tito, who had been loyal for 30 years and was, at this moment, asleep in his house in the hills and entirely unaware of anything that had happened tonight. Adriano pressed his thumb to the concealed sensor beneath the rear bumper. The trunk release gave its usual soft click. He lifted the lid. He stopped. Inside, curled on the emergency blanket he kept folded in the left corner, was a small girl. She was perhaps 6 years old, dark-haired, dressed in a coat 2 sizes too large for her. Tucked against her chest, sharing her warmth with the easy familiarity of long practice, was a puppy, small, black, with oversized ears and the deeply relaxed posture of an animal that had never once considered that the world might be dangerous. Both of them were asleep. In the distance, police sirens moved through the city like slow, searching lights. Adriano had perhaps 4 minutes before the perimeter tightened. He stood at the open trunk of his most secret vehicle, in the middle of the worst night of the operational year, and looked at a sleeping child and her dog. The girl opened one eye. She regarded him with the level of assessment of someone who had learned very young to decide quickly whether a stranger was a threat. She appeared to reach a conclusion. She closed her eye again. "Your car smells like pine trees," she said without moving. "I like it." Don Adriano Mancuso, who had survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 government investigations and 25 years at the summit of Castello's criminal world, had no response to this. He had no protocol for this. He had no protocol for any of this. He stood there for 3 more seconds. Then, with the quiet, deliberate movement of a man who has just made a decision he doesn't fully understand yet, he reached into the trunk, lifted the girl, puppy and all, and carried her to the back seat. He tucked the emergency blanket around both of them. The girl did not open her eyes again. The puppy made a small sound of contentment and went back to sleep. Adriano got in the driver's seat, started the engine and drove north. He had no idea in that moment that the child sleeping in his back seat was about to dismantle 25 years of careful, armored, deliberate solitude. He only knew that he wasn't leaving her on the street. That was enough for now. Before we go any further, if you're already invested in Adriano and that little girl in the back seat, you're exactly who this channel is made for. Hit that notification bell, so you never miss a story like this one. Like this video if you want more. Stories about the unexpected moments that break even the hardest people open. Subscribe to the channel, because we are just getting started. The safe house was a farmhouse 40 minutes north of Castello, 11 years owned through a shell company, used perhaps a dozen times, always alone. Adriano pulled into the barn and sat in the silence after the engine died, listening to 2 small beings breathe. He could not leave a child in a car overnight. He could not call anyone, The fewer people who knew this property existed, the safer it was. He woke her with a touch to the shoulder. She was awake before his hand fully landed. "We stopped," she said. "We stopped," he confirmed. She looked around the barn, tucked the puppy under her arm, and fixed him with an expression that managed to convey both complete dependence and absolute self-possession. "Okay. But he's going to need water. He always needs water when he wakes up." Adriano found a bowl. The puppy launched itself at the water and sent most of it across the tiles. In the kitchen light he saw her properly for the first time. Small, dark-eyed, coat belted with twine, shoes too small on one side and too large on the other, a smudge of mud on her cheek. Not malnourished, but hungry. He could tell. She was assessing him with the same thoroughness. "You're not a normal person," she said. "Normal people would have called someone by now." He made bread and cheese and tinned tomatoes. She ate with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned not to take food for granted. When she finished, she folded her hands and looked at him. "What's your name?" "Adriano." "I'm Lucia." "He doesn't have a name yet. I found him under a market stall 2 days ago. He was very wet." She said goodnight at the kitchen door and paused. "Thank you for the food." No performance. Just the true thing said because it was true. Adriano couldn't remember the last time someone had thanked him without an ulterior motive shading the words. He sat alone in the kitchen long after her footsteps faded, and tried to remember the last time this house had felt like anything other than a holding pattern. He couldn't. Morning came gray and rain-soft. Adriano was at the kitchen table with his encrypted phone when she appeared in the doorway, hair aggressively unbrushed, puppy under one arm, the same clothes as yesterday. She located the fridge, poured milk, sat down across from him and settled in. He put his phone face down. He had the distinct sense that trying to control this conversation would be as effective as controlling the weather. "Why did you come to the car at night?" "I needed to go somewhere." "Because of the sirens?" He redirected. She told him about the fish market, her uncle, her mother who had died when she was 4. She said it without apology or performance, just the truth of her situation, relevant and stated. Then she tilted her head. "Were you running from the police?" "What makes you ask that?" "Normal people don't run from sirens. You didn't call anyone when you found me. And this place doesn't look like a regular house. It looks like somewhere a person keeps for when they need to disappear." She said it with genuine intellectual satisfaction. Adriano had been assessed by government investigators, rival family representatives, a journalist who had spent 6 months building a case. None of them had gotten there this fast. She held his gaze and made her decision about him. Then she told him everything. Her uncle René, the debt, the men who said she was worth something because of something her mother had left behind. She'd heard her uncle agree to hand her over. So she left. "Did you hear a name?" "Greco," she said. "They kept saying Greco." Adriano picked up his coffee. Set it down. The Grecos, his Eastern problem, encroaching on territory he'd held for 15 years. The child in front of him, feeding bread crusts to a nameless puppy, was the thread that connected directly to the center of his most urgent problem. "You know who they are, don't you?" It wasn't a question. "Get your cup," he said. Sarah arrived at 10, driving a different car and wearing the expression she reserved for situations that required her to revise her assumptions about the world. She walked into the kitchen, Adriano at the table, Lucia on the floor sorting dried beans, the puppy eating them as fast as she sorted, and went very still. "There is a child on your kitchen floor." "I'm aware." "And a dog." "Also aware." Lucia looked up, assessed Sarah in 3 seconds and went back to her beans. "You're his work person," she said. "Not a friend." "Something like that," Sarah said without offense. What followed was the most methodical, gentle debriefing Adriano had witnessed in years. Lucia was an exceptional witness. Detailed, accurate, unembellished, clear about what she knew versus what she inferred. The Grecos had used her uncle's cold storage operation as a money conduit. The debt was cover, what they actually wanted was access. Lucia was leverage. Then came the fragment that changed everything. Her mother had been a bookkeeper for a previous South Quarter operation. She had kept records. The Grecos believed those records existed, and that Lucia, as her mother's heir, could lead them to it. Among her mother's hidden belongings, photographs, a journal, and a key. What did the key look like? Lucia described it. Old-fashioned, brass, a number stamped into the bow. A deposit box key. Adriano and Sarah did not look at each other. They'd worked together long enough not to need to. Later, alone, Sarah sat across from Adriano and was quiet for a moment. She's 3 days on her own and still that collected. Her mother must have been something. Sarah looked at the door Lucia had gone through, then back at Adriano with the expression she used when she was saying something by not saying it. "Don't," he said. "I haven't said anything. I know what you're not saying." Sarah picked up her coffee. "I'll start on the Greco intelligence." By the second full day, Adriano had established rules. They were sensible. They would be followed. Lucia was to stay out of the study. Not touch the documents. Keep the dog in the kitchen. No modification requests at meals. Silence during calls. She had listened attentively and nodded at each point. By noon, the dog was on the armchair, the study door had been opened, and 3 documents had been moved 4 inches left to make room for a drawing project. "The armchair," Adriano said. He was cold. "The kitchen floor is stone. The documents. I moved them 2 centimeters. I didn't look at them." He looked at the armchair. The dog wagged. "Find him a blanket. He stays on the blanket." She beamed. 2 front teeth slightly too large for her face. Completely unguarded. He went back to the study and stared at the wall for a moment before returning to work. That afternoon he took a 40-minute call with the door closed. When he emerged, she had moved the documents back to their original positions, measured from the table edge within a millimeter. "I'm good at remembering where things are," she said. A fact, not a boast. That evening, making pasta together, she said, "When I grow up I want to know everything. How boats work, what's inside mountains, how people decide what's right. You have to aim at something," she added. "Otherwise you just go wherever you end up." Adriano stirred the sauce and thought about a 17-year-old boy who had aimed at something and hit it and discovered, too late, what it had cost. Later he found her asleep on the armchair with the dog, technically both on the blanket. He turned the lamp off and went to bed, thinking about the rules she had, cheerfully and without apparent awareness, renegotiated every single one of. On the 3rd day Sarah came back with the full picture. The Greco brothers, Fausto and Leone, Palermo-connected, methodical, didn't attack operations directly. They subverted infrastructure. Dock workers, storage operators, small debtors with useful positions. Obligation and silence, slowly constructed. Lucia's uncle had been one such person. His cold storage units used for 3 months to move product through a channel that ran directly beneath Adriano's eastern supply lines like a parasite. The deposit box, Sarah believed, contained 12 years of ledgers, a complete financial map of the Castellan underworld. In the right hands, enough to dismantle Adriano's network entirely or hand it to the authorities as a bargaining chip. "The cold calculation," Sarah said, "is straightforward. We surface the girl's location through the right channels. The Grecos come to us on ground we choose. We remove them. She'd be returned to her uncle. She wouldn't be harmed. But she'd be back in the equation," Adriano said. Briefly. "Yes. What's the other option?" "Slower. More expensive. Find the deposit box through the key alone. Build a protected placement outside the Grecos' reach using their own network. Harder, no guarantees. The first option is cleaner and lower risk for us," Sarah said. "The second option is better for her." Adriano went to the window. Outside, Lucia was trying to teach Gianda to fetch. The dog retrieved the stick and then treated the return portion as entirely optional. She was explaining with great patience that this was not how the game worked. The dog was listening with great attention and continuing not to return the stick. Adriano watched for 30 seconds. "Begin the second option," he said. "Start with the deposit box." Sarah made a note. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. "She's named the dog," Adriano said, still at the window. "Gianda. Acorn." "Of course she has," Sarah said. The fourth day was the quietest. Adriano worked. Lucia invented her own world from the available materials: dried beans, sticks, old paperbacks, a ball of twine from the barn. In the mornings he could hear her explaining things to Gianda: how to fetch properly, the difference between clouds, a theory about cheese making that was 60% correct. In the afternoons the kitchen was shared. She asked questions, not about him but about the world, filing everything away. How encryption worked. Why rivers ran to the sea. And then, what's the difference between brave and reckless? She'd been thinking about her own escape, she said, deciding whether it counted. Brave is when you're scared but you think carefully and do the right thing anyway. Reckless is when you're scared and just do the first thing. "What did you do?" he asked. "I thought about it for a whole day. Planned where I'd go, what I'd take. Then I left." "Then you were brave," Adriano said. That evening, peeling potatoes, she asked if he had children. He told her about Marco, 26, far away, kept at distance for safety. "My mother did that," Lucia said quietly. "She sent me to the neighbors and said it was sleepovers. I think she thought she could handle things better without me there. But I think she was also just lonely. I think we could have been together." The kitchen was very quiet. "You should call him," she said. "Lucia. I'm just saying." She went back to her potato. Adriano looked out at the dark yard and thought about a phone call 4 months not made, and the shape of the distance that had accumulated, and whether safety and loneliness had somewhere along the way become the same thing. "You're going to be okay," she said without looking up. "You think carefully and you don't leave people in car parks in the rain. That's 2 good signs." The call came at 6 on the 5th day, through a lawyer to Sarah to Adriano's phone in 3 minutes flat. The Grecos had traced a missing child from the South Quarter to the night of the warehouse raid, connected that to Adriano's operation, and drawn the only logical conclusion available to men who had never heard the true story: that Adriano had moved on Lucia deliberately, had already obtained the key and was working the deposit box. From their position he held all the leverage. Their offer, a territorial concession in the Eastern District, formalized through the usual channels, in exchange for the girl's return and 18 months of mutual restraint. Objectively reasonable. Also an offer that would return Lucia to an uncle who had already agreed to hand her over, within reach of a Greco operation that would come for her again the moment the deal expired. Adriano called Sarah, confirmed the deposit box was close, and went to find Lucia. She was on the back step in the early evening light, Gianda beside her, both of them watching the treeline with the same alert stillness. She turned when the door opened. "Something's wrong," she said. "Something needs to be dealt with," he said. He sat beside her on the step. Gianda investigated his shoe and returned to the trees. "Are you going to send me back?" The word came before he had consciously formed it. "No," he said. And then again quieter, "No. I'm going to deal with them. It will take a few more days." "I'm good at patient," she said. They sat together as the light went gold and then gray. A bird worked through a long song in the trees, unhurried, as though the evening had all the time in the world. "Thank you," she said, "for not sending me back." "Get inside before it gets cold," he said. "Both of you." The deposit box was at the Banca del Sud on Pescatori Street. Adriano obtained access through the kind of means he had spent 25 years developing. On the morning of the 6th day, a courier arrived with a sealed document case. The ledgers were meticulous. 12 years of financial flows in a small, clear hand. Someone who had understood exactly what she was recording and had decided, for reasons of her own, to record it completely. The records implicated the Greco's entire early network. They also implicated, in 3 entries from 12 years ago, transactions Adriano recognized as predating his direct control of that sector. He sat with them for a long time. He could destroy them. Clean, efficient, the problem dissolved for everyone. But it would also eliminate the most complete record of Greco criminal activity in existence. Evidence that, in the right hands, could permanently end what they had built. He thought about the boy who had aimed at something and hit it and discovered too late what it had cost. He thought about the phone call 4 months not made. He thought about the word no that had come out of him on the back step without deliberation, as though something underneath all the deliberation had spoken first. He called Sarah. Find me the right magistrate. Someone who doesn't owe anyone anything and isn't afraid of the Grecos. You're going to give them the ledgers. The relevant portions. Carefully edited. The Grecos' leverage over the uncle would dissolve. Their operation would collapse. Lucia would cease to be useful to anyone. And Lucia? Sarah asked. Protected placement. The real network. A family outside the city. And Sarah, the dog goes with her. Whatever placement you find has to accommodate the dog. A brief pause. Of course, Sarah said. Entirely neutral. Something like warmth beneath it. He closed the document case. He went to make coffee. From the kitchen came the familiar sound of Gyanda's water bowl and a small girl making a borrowed space feel like home. It took 4 more days. The magistrate, SSA Farini, 53, prosecutorial record never once overturned, received the information through a channel clean enough to be untraceable. The Greco brothers were occupied with a legal problem of considerable severity within 72 hours. Their operation in the South Quarter collapsed. Their leverage over Lucia's uncle dissolved with it. The placement was a couple in a hill town 2 hours south, a former teacher and a carpenter with a house, a garden, and 3 years of approved foster paperwork waiting to be used. The garden was large enough for a dog. Sarah confirmed this specifically. On the morning of the 9th day, Adriano told Lucia. He was straightforward about it because she deserved that. A family. Good people. School. Real safety. She listened without interrupting, saving her questions. Will you visit? His prepared answer, careful contact, her own life, managed distance, dissolved on contact with her gaze. Yes, he said. Will you call your son? I'm going somewhere new and you told me to be brave, she said. So you should be brave too. It's only fair. I'll think about it. That's not the same as yes. Can Gyanda have cheese before we go? He can have 2 pieces, Adriano said. The Melees, warm faces, house that smelled of wood and bread, received them with a naturalness Adriano recognized as real. At the door, Lucia turned to him one last time. They're good, she said. Thank you for not leaving us in the car park. Thank you for finding my car, he said. She smiled the full gap-toothed beam. Then she went inside after the dog and the door closed. That night, alone in the garage, the car smelling of pine air freshener as it always did, Adriano found his son's contact. Marco. He pressed call. It rang twice. Papa. Something shifted, not broke but opened. The way a door gives when it's been closed long enough to stick. Marco. I'd like to come and see you. If that's all right. Okay, Papa, his son said. Okay. He sat a long time after the call ended. Then he started the engine and drove home. For the first time in a long time, the city looked through the windscreen like somewhere a person might actually live. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe to bring you more stories like this. Goodbye.